Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I want to talk about the People's Summit. I wish to discuss the People's Summit. So I know there was criticism. There was the level that the people who went to the summit and the summit itself. One thought being there was dark money running through it. I heard another criticism that people were being co-opted. Look, Bernie Sanders was the co-sponsor to the People's Summit. If you're going to look at it, I think you need to have a little bit more context. And I don't think it's fair, per se, to give certain criticisms if you didn't go to it. Meaning, how do you know what you're criticizing if you weren't at the thing that you were actually criticizing? Now, I've criticized these organizations before with this idea these guys are talking to themselves in a room. But if you're saying this organization is co-opting, then you need to explain how they're co-opting. And if they're co-opting, it has to be something going on the premises to be doing that particular co-opting. I think I'm being fair on this when I say it adds a little bit more oomph to it if you were there and say, yeah, these people are trying to co-opt. That's the first point. Second point, there needs to be more context in this, because I don't think the narrative is fair, if that makes sense. All right, so let's take some context. When Obama ran in 2008, he put hope and change on the ballot. Literally, hope and change on the ballot. Now, that hope and change quickly turned into, I guess, despondency and disappointment through his administration, when you realize that for the most part, he was Bush with some tweaks. So the people's want for hope and change, or the people's hopes for change, was unfounded. Now, the next time an election comes around, hope and change is actually on the ballot. On the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders was a Vermont independent that got into the Democratic Party in order to run in the Democratic primaries. On the other side, you had Trump being the wild card. Now, the people said they wanted change, and many of them didn't particularly care how they got it. Meaning that you had a choice. You had a choice for the left populace or the right-wing populace, meaning the blue-collar billionaire versus the actual blue-collar guy. Only one of those is real. Only one of those makes sense. The one that made sense was cheated, meaning hope that was on the ballot was dashed. It was dashed. Now, you can imagine the elation that people felt in regards to having somebody that espoused their values, espoused them in a way that was unabashed, that was progressive, didn't hedge, didn't back away, will make a moral argument in regards to the way we should behave in regards to our particular economy, and would do so without any hedging at all. I understand this is right, and because I understand this is right, I'm going to say it. Now, this resonated. This resonated like nobody's business. But at the point where that hope was dashed, it all deflated. And it sent those people into the depths of a certain political depression. How it was deflated sent them into blinding rage. That's important to understand. Like, it's hard to understand progressive politics without that context, that very specific context. The person who was cheated, who's battered, who's toted around as a trophy of sorts, who's laughed at by the other corporate Democrats and their hillbots, he turns around and supports the person who did that to him. You thought the blinding rage was bad. That blinding rage turned into, again, further political depression, but this time with a certain jaded cynicism that stung, like that hurt. We cared for you. We stumped for you. We were on Twitter battling for you. We were at rallies for you. We emptied our pockets for you. They cheated you. And you turn around and support them. That's a betrayal. However you want to color it. However you want to add that he had to do it and everything else. Just understand that is, by definition, somewhat of a betrayal, particularly to those people, myself included. Now, Hillary lost. She lost a reality show host. Badly. Now, granted, she got 3 million more votes, but most of those came from California. California is a massive state. When you look at the map itself, she got blown away. People wanted change. They wanted something different. They didn't want her. She was status quo 101. So 15 million people abandoned the Democratic Party after the hijinks that went on in the primaries. 15 million people abandoned ship. That is an exodus. That's one of those Bob Marley exoduses. Now, in leaving though, they left angry. They were spiteful. Now, some people, you must understand, had stopped engaging themselves into political party politics. Meaning they talk about politics, they deal with politics, but for the most part they were independents. And yet they supported Sanders. When Sanders turned around and supported some Democratic candidate, particularly when they cheated him, oh, it hurt. Because it wasn't just a betrayal from the standpoint of Sanders being betrayed. Me losing my money, me losing my candidate, my hope being dashed. You know, because think about it. That person is on cloud 9. Hope is just fulfilled. But the moment that's dashed, they don't go back to 0. They go below 0 because that hope crashes through the floor. You can understand them being angry. People process those things in different ways. For some people, they were crying. Other people were pissed. Other people didn't necessarily know how to feel. I would say, though, that with so many people leaving the party has a problem. And the party solves that problem by saying, all right, we're not going to come to any honest recognition of what took place. We don't want to talk about it. What we will do is scream Russia, and we will say that we're completely united. Now, saying you're completely united looks absolutely ridiculous. When you have 15 million people leave and you say you're united. United with who? United with what? You have your Hillbots. You're united with them. But that's pretty much it. But yet, that's the story that they ran with. We're united. Sanders had decided to help them in this. He decided to help them in this. He became the outreach coordinator. Now, the fact that they have an outreach coordinator gets across to them that they have difficulties in regards to the people who left their party. They understand it. They understand why. They don't want to acknowledge it, but they understand why. Having Sanders out there is get those people back into the party, sheepdog. Keith Ellison was the same way. Get those people back into the party, sheepdog. Come on, do your job. Get them back. The problem is, you're going to get some people who don't fully understand the difference between Sanders and somebody else. But the moment Sanders opens his mouth, it makes whoever he's standing beside look horrid, particularly to progressives, because they can't compete. They can't say the same things. The thing that Sanders can say, because his base is of the American population, the people. The thing that Perez can say is constrained by the people who are paying him. Meaning Perez is not going to say anything about the billionaires on our back, because those are the people who are giving Perez money. Stuffing money in his G-string, sending him out there to parrot in the agenda. Which means that if he say those things that Sanders is saying, he would lose that cash. He can't do it. They look ridiculous side by side. That being said, the DNC, Democratic Party, turned their sights on, okay, we're going to try to leverage how bad Trump is to get people to not care about how bad we are. And so that's what they did. Trump and Russia. They screamed it at the top of their lungs. Trump and Russia. Those things are connected somehow. Nobody knows how, but those things are connected somehow. Trump and Russia. Don't talk about us. Don't look at us. Don't talk about our problems. Don't look at our warts. Trump and Russia. At the exact same time, Bernie Sanders is running an insurgency campaign. Now, if you're running an insurgency campaign, by definition, you're an insurgent. You're inside of something. Meaning, he's been working with some of the other organizations in order to get people to run against the other Democrats. Now, right here is the crux of it. That's the crux of it. Brand new Congress, Justice Democrats. And I don't know if Our Revolution is still doing it, but I thought Our Revolution was doing it. But Sanders may be working in conjunction with those groups. Those people are running for office. Progressives, at least from Sanders' standpoint, progressives, or at least they're supposed to be, running for office, challenging corporate Democrats. Now, for the first time in my awareness, do we have progressives standing up with a backbone and going after the corporatists, the establishment, the people in the party who don't give a shit about their constituents and only care about who's putting money in their pockets? That's the first time. The turn of the worm. We developed a spine, and in developing a spine, we pointed to who we needed to take down, and we went after them. Now, whether they win or lose, I would prefer them to win, all things being equal, but if they win, or if they lose, you've still made a point. You've still made a statement. Now, the catch is, these people are running in the Democratic Party. That's the catch. And if you're progressive, there is a massive, massive headwind dealing with that party. So when I went to vote, I voted neither. I couldn't bring myself to vote for either one of the candidates. Perello was not a progressive. I don't even know who the other guy was. The other guy won. I could care less. I'm not a Democrat. Which is the crux of the issue also. There is a massive headwind in doing anything with Democratic politics because of what they did in the primaries. Meaning, again, it's not just we didn't vote for you in essence. So we're not just we left the party. We left the party and we are scornful of that party. We're scornful. Perello would have needed an influx of voters to come out to vote for him. And guess what? Progressives could care less. He lost badly. He lost badly. Regardless of what Sanders wanted, this guy lost miserably. Regardless of how this guy tried to paint himself. Nobody bit. Nobody took the bait. The co-opting thing is based on this idea of you guys are going to be pulled into the Democratic Party. That's the thought. Now, for the moment, let's separate two things. Let's separate the YouTubers and the people who went there, who consider themselves progressives, who are known as progressives and went to it. And let's separate the event itself. From the YouTuber standpoint, has anybody gone to the conference and come back talking differently? Anybody? I went to the conference, shook one person's hand after the next, interviewed each person. Would I have voted for him? I don't know. I'm not certain. I told you in one of my other videos, I made this point of how difficult it is to come to some resolution about that situation. The resolution clarifies itself if you had a new party. But dealing with those two parties, it's a hard resolution to make. I struggle with it. I don't know. And I know that struggle is purely conceptual. It's only in my head. And I'm personally saying, this is something that matters. But I'd argue it is something that matters. You're talking about your democracy. And you're talking about a group that was willing to subvert that democracy to get their person in office. They didn't care about you. They didn't care about what you wanted. They didn't even care about the actual political process. What they cared about is, it's her turn. Her vagina needs to be in the White House. It's her turn. I say that a lot. I joke about the whole vagina thing because they made that such a big deal in their campaign. You know, just like, she's going to get all the women. Somebody said, if you don't vote for Hillary Clinton, you're a woman, you're going to go to hell. There's a special place in hell for women who don't vote for Hillary Clinton. It's one thing after the next. Her being a woman had nothing to do with her running for that office. Zero. At least to me. It had nothing to do with it. What she was going to do in that office is the thing that mattered. I'm not going to detour. I'm not going to detour. I don't think any of the YouTubers changed their tune. I honestly don't. If you honestly believe that the YouTubers are being co-opted, you need to show me which one, and you need to show me where. That's the first point. Because ultimately, those people came back and those people still spoke and behaved the exact same way. They may have talked more about a particular candidate or something like that, but ultimately, those people were still the same. They went to interact with other lefties. I went to interact with other lefties. I wanted to meet some of these people that I see online. I wanted to meet some of the candidates. I wanted to meet some of the personalities. I got to meet Nina Turner. I got to meet Jimmy Dore. Do you honestly believe that Jimmy Dore is being co-opted? Nina Turner said she was a renegade Democrat. That didn't sound like somebody who was being co-opted to me. That sounded like somebody who was pretty militant. So let's put that to the side for a moment. Let's go back to the other point. The show itself, the summit itself. Regardless of who put the summit on, the question has to be asked, what are the people experiencing inside the summit? You could have whoever put the summit on. Now, that person may take some influence into it. But again, your question becomes, what takes place inside the summit? That's the thing that's going to matter ultimately. Because if you're saying those people are being co-opted, they're being co-opted there. Not necessarily just because of some conceptual summit. No. You're saying they're being co-opted means something real world is happening on the ground that's getting those people into a particular party. That's what's being said. What I saw at the summit was a large contingent of draft Bernie. Now, that contingent of draft Bernie is antagonistic towards the Democratic Party. It is literally trying to suck away members of the party into a new party, destroying the Democratic Party. That doesn't seem like co-opting to me. That seems like the opposite of co-opting. When Sanders is giving a speech and those people are raising their thing saying, draft Sanders, people yelling out, you were cheated, you were cheated. That doesn't sound like co-opting to me. Or at the very least, it is the worst co-opting in the history of co-opting. Now, Sanders' intention may be, we need to get these people in office. That's fair. But it didn't seem like the crowd was biting. It didn't. Now, and there's another interesting point here. I spoke to the woman from Brand New Congress. And I say, you're running in the Democratic Party. We're not Democrats. I know, but come on, you're running in the Democratic Party. I mean, certainly you know that people are going to have some feel. We're not Democrats. We need the machinery. We're not Democrats. Very adamant, very clear, very insistent, regardless of how much I push back. We're not Democrats. That's not who we are. That doesn't seem like co-opting. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I understand what people are saying when they're talking about this co-opting stuff. But these people who were there were scornful of the party. Absolutely scornful. They hadn't changed one iota. Those people looked at Sanders as being separate and distinct from the Democratic Party. Meaning they would fall in line for Sanders, but they would probably not fall in line for anybody else. From Sanders' point, he's looking at it as the mechanics, the machinery itself is what I need. And trying to start fresh, I don't think he's up to it. I think he full well understands or full well believes that he could change the Democratic Party from the inside. Meaning he's getting one person after the next to try to run and challenge these guys so he can get more progressives in office. Not just in federal government, all throughout the country. And you have other groups to assist with this. Now, if that's true, you can look at that as co-opting. Because ultimately those people are running in the Democratic Party itself. You could say that. You could say that. But I would make this case that co-opting means more than just running in the Democratic Party, if that makes sense. I know Democrats are trying to co-opt the movement, but if they co-opt a movement but at the same time get destroyed from the inside, is that it worth the exchange? I mean, honestly, is it? Regardless of what Sanders thinks, that's how he's functioning. That is how he's functioning. He's functioning with this idea of, I am functioning within a Democratic Party. I'm going to use the party apparatus to try to change the party. Now, personally, I think this is a fool's errand. I don't think you can change that party from within. And I think he has all the gravitas that he needs to do something different. What's missing is the will to do something different in this case. So, if the goal of the summit was to co-opt, it was done poorly. It was done very poorly. That's the first point to get at. The second point to get at is, yes, Sanders is trying to get people back into the Democratic Party. Yes, that comes with a massive headwind in regards to progressives. And yes, we need a third party. But you can see our dilemma. We have two vehicles. And look, I'm saying this, I'm not voting for Democrat. Or at the very least, he better be a green that snuck in the Democratic Party. And even then, it would be difficult to do. But you have one vehicle. Or you said two vehicles, Republican, Democratic. We have no other vehicles. Like, we're stuck in this quagmire of, if you're saying this is co-opting, this is whatever, then the question becomes, well, what other vehicle are you going to use to articulate your legislative will? And if the only vehicle that we have at our disposal right now is that party, And Sanders, in his mind, is thinking we need to tackle that thing, and we need to get people in that position in order to change that party. That's his thinking. Because he's looking at it as we have no other vehicle. And that's a true statement. We have no other vehicle. Now, whether or not you can take that vehicle is a whole different story. That's a whole different question. That's an entirely different question. And ultimately, that's the war that's brewing in regards to the Democratic Party. This civil war of sorts. This insurgency. On the outside, you have Draft Sanders and you have other parties coming for the head of the Democratic Party. Coming for their heads. All those people who left have been coalescing into this thing called Draft Sanders. We want Sanders in a People's Party. We want Sanders to leave, interact with the Democrats, and come with us. Now, this shouldn't be too difficult to do because Sanders is technically independent. And yet, it's difficult for him to do. He's only known working within the party apparatus, so I would imagine in his head, this is the way I typically function. This dealing with politics are the tools to which I'm accustomed to. So I would imagine it's a hard jump to get him to go over to a People's Party when he thinks that there's a chance that he could change the Democratic Party. If you want him in the People's Party, in every election, vote Republican. That sounds crazy, but you need to show utter failure in getting anything accomplished. And I'm being somewhat flippant here. I don't want you to vote Republican. I'm just saying it would take a certain amount of failure for Sanders to realize, okay, nothing's going to take place in this party. I need to do something different. He started the Sanders Institute. And again, there are all these other groups that have sprung up also. They are trying to attack the Democratic Party from the inside. Draft Sanders is trying to attack it from the outside. That party is under siege. The party is under siege. If this is co-opting, it is the worst co-opting I've ever seen in my life. It really is. I agree that some things are Democrats trying to co-opt when they're saying resistance. Well, I don't know what resistance means. If you're LGBTQ, resistance is I'm fighting for gay rights. If you're black, I'm fighting for African American rights. If you're a woman, I'm fighting for women's rights. All of these groups are looking at it as Trump is trying to do something to us. The Democrats says resistance kind of as this catch-all term that would allow people to fill in whatever they want in regards to the meaning. I'm just going to say resistance. Your own cognitive processes can come up what that means to you. And just come with us if that's what you want to do. That's co-opting. Like, that's literally co-opting 101. A bunch of lefties and progressives at a summit that are disdainful of the Democratic Party and that openly are trying to destroy that party outside and within. Come on, certainly there's a difference in those things. Certainly there's a difference in those things. Now, the People's Summit itself wasn't bad. Like I said, I got to meet a lot of people. A lot of networking. And Sanders' speech was a Sanders speech. He's awesome. Don't get me wrong, there were parts of it that was immensely hypocritical. When he's talking about Trump and Saudi Arabia and Yemen, that's amazingly hypocritical coming from somebody who's functioning with the Democratic Party, a company man. Now, there is a perspective that says, yes, he is co-opting because he's an outreach coordinator. His job is to bring people back into the party. Well, company man at this point is looking to get people to run. Like I said, it's Democrats. So however you see that, if you see it as he's trying to run insurgency on the inside and get those people out their offices, that's one way to see it. If you're trying to say he's just trying to run people as Democrat and that's going to keep status quo, that's another way to see it. That's another way to see it. All I'm saying is that was the worst co-opting job in the history of co-opting jobs, if that was the point of the People's Summit. That's all I'm saying. In regards to the good points of the summit, it was a nice chance to meet other people of lefties. It just was. I enjoyed it. I really did. Just meeting these guys in person, people who you see either on YouTube, on television, whatever. It was nice seeing them, shaking their hands. The bad parts of is it kind of misses the point. Kind of misses the point. If your goal is to have something like that, like a real People's Summit, shouldn't it be something active as opposed to just something informative? Every group that you went in, for the most part, you've already agreed with all the people in that group. All of you guys were already in political alignment. The goal of the summit should have been an actual summit. We're coming here to discuss what's going to take place next. Meaning, I'd argue that that summit should have been, what is going to be the Constitution that we're going to fight for? What is our manifesto? I'd argue that that should have been the point of the summit. Battle it out, write it down. And when you write that down, you try to have one in each of the states. Maybe not you, but each state. And each state does their own thing, meaning this is the people's constitution of this particular state. Now, you need to get more and more people to come to that particular thing because you need that thing to be filled up with more and more people. I would even argue you need to get people who are independents into this process. Relentlessly fight for independence to get into that process. The larger that gets, the stronger you get. Because if those people say, yes, we're going to vote in political alignment, all of us are going to vote the same. And all of us are voting on whether or not the candidate lives up to these particular issues. And if they don't, they're not going to get our vote. I think that's when you start to change things in regards to summits. Us having a summit where a bunch of lefties sit in a room and talk to each other. I don't know if that changes anything. I know it makes you feel better, like a church service. But how do you change? That's the point I'm getting at. What are the things that you do to change things? That was my question mark, and that was the answer I didn't necessarily get. I would argue that summit idea is probably the best case scenario, at least that I can think of. Yeah, I leave it at that. I didn't think it was bad. I thought the People's Summit was okay. I think I said before, like on the first panel, I got really pissed off. I mean, I was active in it and everything else, but I was getting annoyed because I felt like we already agree. Why are we here? Why are we here? We already agree. I want to talk about things that we actively can do together. We have 4,000 or 5,000 people. Are you telling me that all 4,000 or 5,000 people can't come up with some consensus on how to behave and act for a cause, for a very specific cause? That's what I would have wanted. I would have turned it into some vehicle of sorts. Meaning when we left, there was a vehicle that was persistent in that particular state that had a very specific job of fighting or behaving in a legislative political way. Ever present, constant. It would find some way to develop resources in order to build itself out. But at the very least, the framework of it would have been debated on and clarified and chosen there. That's what I would have wanted it to be. Just something active and different, not necessarily this passive thing where we just talk to each other. Yeah, that's all. I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the content, feel free to share, rate, subscribe, and you can always support the work through Patreon. And by the way, this wasn't pointed. Like, this wasn't aimed. I heard the criticism. I forgot where I heard it from. I think it was like online or something. But I mean, the criticism from the standpoint of they are trying to get people to vote Democrat. That's true and that's fair because that's what they are trying to do. The question becomes, who are the people they're voting for? Like all those people, real progressives, and if those people are real progressives, almost pretty much Green Party members, and I can tell you from my own conversations. Some of those guys were far to the left, like to the left where they're having these conversations about capitalism being a problem. Are you telling me that the guy who's talking about capitalism being a problem is being co-opted? Or is that guy trying to use the mechanisms of the Democratic Party to change that party from the inside? Now, granted, none of those people get your vote until you can see that they're changing the party, actually, or that particular guy is actually who that guy says he is. But like I said, this is the worst case of co-opting I've ever seen. Unless they're going to kick it up in high gear in season 3. But right now, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. Co-opting is being attempted, yes. Is this the summit to do it? I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Alright guys, have a good one.